For a good chunk of my childhood, I grew up playing Nintendo games like Mario, Zelda, and Smash Bros. Games I cherished and thoroughly enjoyed. But about half a year ago, I stumbled upon the most underrated Nintendo gem I had slept on for all my life, Pikmin. I've always known the existence of Pikmin, as it is fairly iconic among Nintendo's IPs. Though, while Pikmin has its own dedicated community and devoted fans, it's never reached the same popularity of Nintendo's bigger franchises. Partly because there are only a handful of main titles in the series, and the game's genre is not exactly a one-size-fits-all. But I beg to differ on that latter part. I did not play Pikmin as a child, so I don't have much nostalgia bias towards it, so that aspect is thrown out the window. Yet, with that aside, I am completely enamored by its strategic gameplay and cute charm. And heck, strategy games aren't usually my go-to when it comes to video games. However, everything from its gameplay to its story is crafted with strokes of genius. Today I'll be talking about what the heck is a Pikmin and why I love the game. I'll be specifically discussing the first game in the series, which I played via the Pikmin 1 and 2 bundle on the Switch. Pikmin 1 is where the series first started, it's my favorite one, and I have quite a bit to say about its contents. Anyway, I'm Cab, the BugFishGaming nerd, and without further ado, this is my retrospective on Pikmin 1. A little background history first. In the beginning of the next decade, the Nintendo GameCube was Nintendo's next big console, releasing in 2001. Among one of the first games to launch for the system was Pikmin, a strategy action adventure game that would set out to be Nintendo's next iconic IP. It was a bit surprising a Mario platformer didn't launch with the console, and it was only until next year we got one. So while Mario wasn't in the spotlight, something else would have to take its place. And boy did Pikmin not disappoint. As games got more advanced over time, being able to process and store more data, they could do some nifty things. Super Mario 128, a tech demo showcasing the GameCube's features, provided many Nintendo games the tech presented in it. Specifically, the ability for games to simulate many objects and entities on the screen at the same time. Pikmin was the first to utilize this technology. It's worth noting that while Mario 128 helped the development of Pikmin, the concept was well in the works in the mid-90s. Shigeru Miyamoto, who helped the design and creation of Pikmin, was inspired by childhood memories to create a lot of Nintendo's games. In Pikmin's case, it was gardening that inspired him. The basic idea of the game was that you would be able to grow your own AI units, which would fight for you and help accomplish different tasks. The concept underwent many changes, not only in gameplay mechanics, but as well as the appearance of the creatures themselves. But the core idea of Pikmin was not lost in translation, and with that came a passionate final product that I think was near perfect. Pikmin had potential, and the tech from Mario 128 would help bring that idea to life. Years later, in E3 of 2001, Nintendo released a beta trailer of Pikmin 1, the first piece of Pikmin media to be shown to the world. Looking back at it now, it has that beta feel to it. The mechanics and level layout would be slightly different in the final product. And what was the final product? Well, in the strange universe of Pikmin, you play as Captain Olimar, a lone spacefarer who travels in this ramshackle of a ship called the SS Dolphin. While venturing on the frontiers of space, Olimar's ship is struck by an asteroid, which sends him plummeting towards a nearby terrestrial planet. Somehow miraculously surviving the crash, Olimar finds his ship busted up, but not completely obliterated. 30 of his ship parts have been separated, scattered across the strange, uncharted world. To make matters worse, his life support systems can only provide him 30 days worth of oxygen before he is subjected to the environment's toxic atmosphere. Time is of the essence, and he must scramble to repair his ship and get off the planet before then. Near his ship, Olimar finds a tripod-looking thing. Is that a creature, or maybe a machine? Olimar decides to call it an onion because of its resemblance to the vegetable on his home planet. It spews out a single seed, which plants itself on the ground and looks ready to harvest. Out of curiosity, Olimar plucks it out of the ground, which produces a small, alien creature he dubs a Pikmin, because of its resemblance to the Pik-Pik carrots back home. Now, this Pikmin is a friendly little thing and shows no hostility towards Olimar, but he concludes that he should pick it up and throw it for research. I don't know his logic, quite frankly, but the Pikmin doesn't seem to mind being hurled. In fact, it'll come racing back to you by the sound of your whistle. Throwing Pikmin at these pellet-like plants will make the Pikmin attack them, and then carry the pellets back to the onion, which interestingly spews out more seeds, producing more sprouts and thus producing more Pikmin to pluck out. As Olimar gathers more Pikmin, he's able to accomplish bigger things, like having the Pikmin push objects out of the way, or haul bigger things back to the base, like his ship's engine, which so happens to be conveniently nearby. Soon night falls, and Olimar is forced to retreat to his ship to avoid the hostile nocturnal creatures. Fortunately, the retrieval of the engine allows him to fly off the surface of the planet temporarily, but not completely escape it. There are still 29 parts to find and retrieve if he has any hope of going home. The onion, now learned to be vital to the Pikmin's survival, acting as the species nurturer that reproduces and shelters them, flies away with Olimar. Olimar's not sure why it does this. Perhaps the onion and its Pikmin look up to him as their leader in a way. The next day, Olimar lands in a different area, the Forest of Hope, he names it. With new daylight to burn and his Pikmin from yesterday, Olimar gets to work and sets out to find more of the missing ship parts. It won't be easy though, since there are other foul creatures not as kind as the Pikmin, who have an appetite for the latter, but also for foreign space visitors like poor Captain Olimar. But Pikmin aren't only good at picking up and hauling stuff back to your base, they make for excellent fighters, and will fight on your behalf to defend you. While they are tiny and frail beings, they make up for their individual strength in their collective numbers. If you manage to take down any creature, the Pikmin can carry their corpses back and use it as fuel for the onion, just like pellets. Many ship parts aren't out there in the open. Some will require knocking down walls, building bridges, defeating certain enemies that contain the parts, etc. All of these things are never too insurmountable for the Pikmin, and they can accomplish anything if you give them enough time. Keyword time. Each in-game day is comprised of around 13 real minutes before sunset comes and the day ends. When that occurs, a countdown will initiate and you must scramble to gather your Pikmin. Any men that are not stored in their onions near the base or are in your party will be left behind and fall victim to the nocturnal creatures. It is imperative that you make use of the time the best you can. You'll want to keep your Pikmin busy with various tasks, and prioritize what needs to be done if you want to obtain all the ship parts. While Pikmin aren't really autonomous and require Olimar in their presence to be thrown and commanded, they are far from useless. You can send away 20 of them to haul back a ship part, send another group to attack and break down a wall, and with the remaining men combat enemies to replenish your numbers. All of this happening at the same time. As long as they are doing something, they will chip away at their task until completion. And even when they aren't doing anything, if a group of Pikmin carrying something happens to pass by them, the idle Pikmin will help out their brethren. This also occurs if they are idle near enemies, in which they will try to combat the creature. Though, it is best to supervise them while they fight so you can call them back if things get messy. And if you think throwing your Pikmin one by one is tedious, you can have all your Pikmin congregate in a particular direction around you. This can be helpful for quickly picking up an object or sending forth everyone to attack an enemy. All of this is Pikmin's main gameplay loop. Get pluck out Pikmin, throw them at enemies or pellets to take down and bring them back to the onions to create more men, collect ship parts, rinse and repeat. Part of what makes Pikmin so enthralling to play is the satisfaction you get from getting more Pikmin and growing your army, the impulsive need to have more men. This game is a hoarder's dream come true, and the aspect of automation and having your little workers chip away at different tasks makes it a fun management game in a way. You want to try and see how much you can get done in a day and get all the ship parts before the 30-day time limit is up. As your excursions on the alien planet go, Olimar encounters more onions, each producing different Pikmin with different abilities. The starting men you get, Reds, are immune to fire, so they're able to safely traverse across fire geysers and fight fire-based enemies. They're also the best attackers, which makes them suitable for nearly all combat situations. Then you get Yellows, which can be thrown higher, making them useful for attacking airborne creatures or retrieving parts too high for other men to reach. They are also able to carry bomb rocks, which are set off when Yellows are thrown, useful for combat or bringing down heavy-duty walls. Last but not least, or yeah, maybe the least, Blue Pikmin. This Pikmin's only trait is being able to traverse in water, whereas its red and yellow counterparts would flail and drown. And that's it. No attack bonus and can't use bombs. Unfortunately, they're really only useful for getting parts that are in the water, and I guess fighting aquatic enemies. The Pikmin community often looks down upon them. But I love these little guys. Their mouth-like gills are cute. As an aquatic entity myself, they have my support. You'll have to utilize all three types masterfully if you want to get off the planet. You are limited to 100 Pikmin out in the field at a time, and any more fuel received by the onions will only create Pikmin in its reserves. This means you'll have to decide how many of each type you'll want out at a time. Part of the strategy is having the right Pikmin out for the right job. Fighting lots of enemies to clear a path for carrying stuff back, bring Reds. Going to dabble in the water for parts? Bring blues. Found some bomb rocks that could be helpful later? Bring yellows. There's quite a bit of synergy between the three types to be realized and executed. Like, you might need yellows to bring those pesky flying creatures down, before sending forth your reds to dish out more damage. Pikmin types and their synergies together would be something the sequels would explore more with new types and new abilities. With all these strategic elements as well as the time aspect combined, it becomes more apparent this game is like a real-time strategy game, where you must manage several units while real-time passes. This game is Nintendo's unique take on the RTS genre. You see, most RTS games are played on a computer, where mouse and keyboard are convenient for the controls. You typically have an overhead view of the whole map where you can easily scroll around and click on units by hovering over them. Pikmin doesn't do that. Since this game was going to be made for the GameCube, a home console, Nintendo had to create mechanics suited for a controller and something approachable that would appeal to a larger demographic, something everyone would want to play. So their solution was having the player control a singular character, Olimar, who is able to move around in a 3D space. The camera stays fixed on him, so you can't check the other parts of the map, and instead of clicking on the units, you have to go up to them and call them to you. Then you can either throw them individually or have them all swarm in a particular direction. It's an interesting take on the genre, and no other game is quite like it without being called a clone or copy or Pikmin-like, as others would put it. There's something refreshing about Pikmin's limited perspective as opposed to being almost an all-watching, omnipresent god in other games, being able to command units here and there in seconds. With that comes a particular vulnerability in Pikmin, that you can't be everywhere at once, and that if your Pikmin are in trouble somewhere, Olimar has to go all the way to their position to help them out. This offers the game its own challenges and difficulty while having controls that console players would be familiarized with. That isn't to say that PC players and RTS players wouldn't enjoy this one. I think Pikmin's similarity with that genre would also make it easy to pick up for those groups too. Camera controls aside, there are also other differences that make this game stand out from the bunch, like the control stick replaces the mouse in this scenario. Of course, the left stick enables you to move around, but it also simultaneously lets you aim where you want to throw your Pikmin, indicated by the circle ahead of you. This is how it was for the original game on the GameCube. Even though there was a right stick, that was only for camera control. Some people didn't like it, some people did. Pikmin 1 ports later through the years changed the way moving and aiming were handled. In the Wii port of the game, pointing the Wii remote would let you aim, while you were free to use the nunchuck to move. The Nintendo Switch port of the game returns to the single stick control for moving and aiming, but there is also a motion control option for aiming in that one. Personally, I don't mind the original control scheme, but the Switch's motion controls adds a bit more precision, which is helpful when aiming for a particular weak spot on an enemy or a narrow platform. But nonetheless, it can be finicky to throw your Pikmin where you want them to be. Precision can be the difference between life or death for your squad. If you're not aiming for the enemy's weak spot, then things will go awry. God forbid you try to attack a spotty bull bear from the front. That guy will chew through dozens of your Pikmin and still be hungry for a main course. I learned that the hard way. Sigh. So there is a bit of manual skill required to play Pikmin, especially with the combat. The combat in Pikmin adds a whole new layer of strategy to it. It's a bit more sophisticated than it appears. There is more to just chucking your men at enemies. Although meat grinder tactics can work in some situations, I just wouldn't recommend it. There are multiple things to consider, like the type of Pikmin you're throwing, where you're aiming to throw, the environment you're fighting in, etc. Most of the time, you'll either throw your Pikmin or have them swarm around the enemy, but then shortly call them back before the enemy eats them, or stuns them and then eats them. Timing when to throw and whistle is essential. Sometimes engaging enemies might not be the best idea. If you don't have much experience with a particular foe, then it might be a sweep for your squad, and your numbers will be weakened. You should only pick fights if you know you won't face many casualties, so you can use the corpses to increase your numbers, or if you're eliminating the enemy so it won't disrupt your other Pikmin carrying stuff back. Every enemy has its weak spot, and it is essential that you aim for them if you have any hopes of surviving with as few casualties as possible. Olimar does have his own health, so he can take a few hits before he's down for good. If that happens, the day automatically ends. You lose all your Pikmin that aren't stored in their onions, and it's on to the next day. By briefly visiting your ship, you can fully restore your health, but honestly, keeping Olimar safe is not much of an issue as it is keeping your Pikmin safe. If you have no Pikmin at the ready, you can't do shit. And if you lose all your Pikmin of a certain color, you won't be able to bring that type back until the next day, or you'll receive a single sprout of that color, giving you the opportunity to build your numbers up again. Now, I think a lot of people would steer clear from RTS games, including myself. but I think Pikmin is forgiving enough with its controls and concept and combat that anyone could get into the game. You only have 3 kinds of units to command, you don't need to worry about 1,000 different stats, and the difficulty isn't too challenging if you have a basic idea of what you are doing. Now, while I adore Pikmin's concept and its presentation, that isn't to say it isn't without its flaws. Being the first game in the series, there is a load of 2001 jankiness and unpolishedness that can make the experience a tad frustrating for both new and old players. The Pikmin can be kinda dumb at times. Sometimes they are clumsy and trip as you're moving along, so you kinda have to wait for them to get up and start following you again. Not the most annoying thing in the world, but you know what is? When your Pikmin stop following you to check out a clump of grass or a rocky spot and start digging in that spot to find any hidden nectar, which if your Pikmin consume, the leaves on their heads will blossom into flowers. This causes them to move, carry out tasks, and attack faster than their leafy counterparts. That's great and all, but if all the Pikmin in your squad have flowers already, you'd probably ignore these spots and go about your business. But do your Pikmin care? No. You have to continuously blow your whistle to reel them back in. This is part of their AI and it gives the illusion they really have a mind of their own. And it usually isn't that bad. But come on guys, let's go get ship parts, not stuff that you won't even eat. That's not the only thing that annoys me. If you have multiple Pikmin types in your party, while holding down the throw button you can sort through which type you want to throw, via another designated button. By doing this, the Pikmin will arrange themselves behind you. Whoever is physically there behind you is next in line to be thrown. But moving while sorting through your Pikmin kinda disrupts the order, and you'll end up throwing reds even after switching to your yellows. You'll pretty much have to stand still so the Pikmin can properly get in their places. In the sequels, this sort of jankiness would be fixed, and quality of life improvements would be made. Starting in Pikmin 3, you'd be able to switch to other types without having to hold down the throw button, and you're free to move however you'd like. One aspect of the Pikmin series as a whole is the element of automation and work and efficiency. You'll want to have a game plan going into each day rather than walking around aimlessly. It is a strategy game after all. There are different ways to optimize your way of getting ship parts. Take the Forest Navel for example. In this underground region, surrounding your base are slopes and ramps and a spiral platform, which you and your Pikmin will have to go around in order to carry stuff back. However, there are these shortcuts blocked off by walls that only bomb rocks can destroy. Opening up these shortcuts might save you more time, but you need to find a source of bomb rocks first, which ironically might cost you a bit of time. You could also ignore this hassle altogether and sacrifice these pathways. It is dilemmas like these that contribute to the strategy element of the game. What you do must be in accordance with obtaining ship parts. How you go about that goal is ultimately up to you. I like having this freedom to do whatever I want, however I'd like. Pikmin 1 definitely has less restrictions than the other games do. Yet, at the same time, it has its own limitations that makes it challenging. In the first game, you're just one guy who commands the Pikmin. In the other games, you have access to more captains, which you can swap between any time and have them cover more ground. But in this game, it's just one captain. Getting from a location to another may take some time, so in order to maximize efficiency, you'll want to have your Pikmin dispersed, but have all of them involved. All hands on deck. This way, moving on from task to task, like clearing paths, hauling back stuff, and plucking out more units is a seamless, harmonious transition. The beauty of automation. Now, I think playing the game for the first time and playing subsequent runs is a lot of fun. A player's first run of the game could be more exciting and tense. The areas, the enemies, and various mechanics of the Pikmin are fresh and new to the mind, providing a unique experience. On my first run, it took me 29 days to obtain all 30 ship parts, which is a bit slow when compared to other, more experienced players, but it added so much to the experience, especially the story aspect. Taking that many days to beat the game made Olimar's fight for survival more authentic and real. You see, at the end of every day, you're shown your records and statistics, like how many Pikmin you've grown and how many you've lost. But also, Olimar will write a journal entry. Sometimes these are observations he's made about the Pikmin's behavior and traits, which can be helpful to know about. Other times he'll note about other creatures' behaviors, which can be helpful for taking them down. But sometimes he'll write personal entries about his family back on his home planet, and how he misses them. Some entries talk about Olimar's hope and despair about leaving the planet. And the thing is, in each run you won't always get the same entries or the same amount of them. It's dependent on what happens during the day and how quickly you beat the game, respectively. Since more days had elapsed for me, I was able to read more of Olimar's notes, especially the more personal, desperate entries he'll write when it's the last few days or so. Pikmin 1 has incredible replay value. Since it's a short game that you can beat in just a few sittings, each run is like an attempt to beat your high score. Playing the game a second time around to make this video, well, it was still really fun, but it was a different experience. It was satisfying to knock off over 10 days of my first score and beat the game in a shorter amount of time, but Olimar's survival and victory did not feel as authentic as the first time around. I think that's partly due to the fact that he made fewer personal entries, of course, but also I roughly remembered where all the ship parts were and how to get them. It's not as much of a gripping tale anymore. The element of the unknown is gone and a part of the challenge dissipates due to your experience. On the first run, you'd know just as much as Olimar would, and you would explore and observe the different areas hoping to find more clues on how to progress, as if you were Olimar. I don't know if anyone else felt like this about subsequent runs, but the story and vibe of the game just tanks a bit because of your meta knowledge, where Olimar suddenly just knows everything from previous runs. However, all that aside, Pikmin gameplay-wise still attains that perfect blend of game length and challenge to make its replayability possible. Even if you do know what you are doing on the second or third or fourth run, the mechanics and jankiness of the game makes it difficult to pull everything off perfectly. There isn't quite like an atmosphere in a game like Pikmin. Although the game is colorful, seemingly cheery, and cute on the surface, I'd argue it's a tad depressing and dark. Space is such a vast world to explore, easy to become isolated in. Olimar's all alone when he ventures far from his homeworld and crashes on the foreign planet. He can't contact anyone for help, and there are no local sapient beings. And of course, thank goodness for the Pikmin's hospitality and friendliness, and willingness to help out their foreign friend. But that doesn't change the fact that Olimar is alone at the end. The journal entries he writes, the more personal ones anyway, really solidified that fact. Now, I won't get into exact spoilers, but I'll just say that the 30-day limit is real, and depending on how many parts you get, you'll get particular endgame results. There's a good ending, a bad ending, and the best ending, and you probably do not want to get the bad ending. Pikmin 1 has 5 main areas to land on and explore. Each one is distinct from each other in terms of map layout and themes. The Forest of Hope is a grassy and calm woods area, tame in its difficulty. The Forest Navel takes you on a descent to the lower levels of the forest, where not only is it dark and dank, but the difficulty of navigating and combating the creatures ramps up a bit. The Distant Spring is a serene but mysterious area that contains a few pools of water where blue Pikmin are a must. All 5 areas have their own ship parts to collect from. You can choose to go to any one you'd like, sometimes based on your current circumstances. Just found blue Pikmin? Then maybe you want to head to the Forest of Hope, so you can revisit the areas that have water you couldn't cross with your Pikmin before. Or maybe it's best to stick around the area you're already in. While enemies you've slain stay dead, like most living things should when they die, after some days they will respawn. Some enemies, like these sheer grubs, can be a hazard if left alone. They will tear down any bridges you construct, so it might be best to stick around and get the jump on whatever you're trying to do before those stupid bastards respawn and wreak havoc. Each area is unlocked when you obtain enough ship parts, so you'll really have to search high and low and quickly if you want to expand your search to other areas. Luckily, once you get the ship's radar, you'll be able to pinpoint the location of all the parts on the map. If you get far into the game and obtain most of the parts, you'll unlock the final area, appropriately named the Final Trial. This area is rather linear and there isn't much exploring to be done, but rather serves as a trial to test your knowledge of the Pikmin's abilities to get the final part. And what lies at the end makes this level feel the most tense and exhilarating. As you explore the planet, which Olimar names PNF 404, which its name wouldn't be mentioned until Pikmin 2, you'll come to the realization this world looks kind of like our own. Miyamoto confirmed that PNF 404 is an alternate world where humans went extinct. And there is evidence of this. I mean, the terrain obviously looks like our Earth, and you'll come across some man-made remnants of humanity that have been long forgotten. In Pikmin 2, you come across more of these remnants in the form of treasures, MacGuffin collectibles in that game, rather than ship parts. Themes and ideas of humanity existing long before Olimar crashed on the planet would be explored a bit in the later games, but in the first game it is more subtle and not forced upon you. It's more natural than, ooh, this is Earth and these are things humans have made, look at this. The world of Pikmin 1 is organic, like its raw gameplay. You would stumble upon something that looks man-made that Olimar simply has no comment on, and then you would just move on. And it really helps the graphics have this realistic vibe to it all. Of course, they are dated, but for what it is, I think it sells the idea that the first game was trying to go for. A world that was once our own, now submerged in serene nature and inhabited by animalistic, alien-looking creatures, resembling that of a true ecosystem. Pikmin 1's music is just phenomenal. Each area has its own theme, and just like the level layout, they are also distinct from each other. They are very much reflective of the surrounding environment. Forest Navel gives off a dank, underground vibe. It's got a spelunking feel to it. The Distant Spring is more ambience than actual melody, soothing and mysterious just like the level. Pikmin also has a bit of dynamic music going on. By default, the area's theme will play like normal. However, when you engage an enemy in combat, the percussion picks up, adding a bit of tension as you fight. When the sun is setting, the music will begin to mellow out and less instruments can be heard. The difference is more noticeable with headphones, and I was surprised by how much of a shift there is with the Distant Spring, as a new element of the theme was added. Not only is this dynamic music a neat little detail, but it has its practicality. Sometimes you're not aware of an enemy that's nearby, so when the music shifts, you realize you have to respond to the threat. Or when the day is about to end, the music reminds you, hey, maybe consider wrapping things up and gathering your men before it's too late. One of my favorite themes from the game is the cheery level select screen. Usually you don't spend a lot of time here since you'll just select the area you want to land on and move on, but if you stay just long enough, you'll hear something catchy and special. Every time I listen to it, it gives me a sense of hope. Hope that Olimar will be able to repair the dolphin with the help of the Pikmin by his side. Another notable piece of music from the game is the little fanfare that plays at the end of the day. Olimar rallies up his men before they are dispersed into their respective onions. He enters his ship and takes off for orbit, with the onions following. The theme is like a celebration and temporary abatement for the dangers of the planet, especially if you have accomplished a lot during the day and didn't lose too many Pikmin. Oh, and I guess one more notable theme is what follows after the end of the day, the results screen, where Olimar writes a journal entry and then you're shown how many Pikmin you sprouted, how many you lost, etc. This one sounds really space-like, with a lot of synth involved. A reminder that Olimar, although friends with the Pikmin, is not from this world and he has to go home eventually. I always imagine Olimar peering out of the dolphin's window and into the endless regions of space while this plays. The feeling of isolation could not be more real. I think the music does a great job at painting the feel of each area and every moment that occurs in the game. With only one speaking character to deliver the game's narrative, the music helps complement this narrative with its melodic vibes. That's just about everything I can talk about Pikmin 1. The game had sold over 1 million copies worldwide around the time of its release, and while that seems like a minuscule number compared to literally anything else, it had its own fanbase that cherished the game very much. Later sequels would sell 1 million or two, with the most recent Pikmin 4 selling 4 million, which is considered to be a major success to most. Many have described the first game to be unique for its strategic, management-based gameplay, and it goes to show it's a testament to Nintendo's ability to create something original and fun. Pikmin has become one of Nintendo's most iconic franchises. Perhaps not as iconic as Mario or Zelda, but it is one that I revere and enjoy. The first Pikmin game, to me, felt reminiscent of good old Nintendo games that simply had that Nintendo charm. But it's more than that. Pikmin kinda invented its own genre. No other RTS game has you personally control a single guy on screen while still being able to command units around you by chucking them at things. The Pikmin are cute creatures, and are an ingenious gameplay mechanic. I mainly talked about the first game because it's simply my favorite, and delving into the rest of the series would take too long to fit into a reasonably sized video. The first game was the only one to have a strict time limit on you. While all the games have a day mechanic of some sort, Pikmin 1's time system forced you to beat the game before your 30 days were up. This mechanic fits the narrative incredibly well with its themes of survival and isolation, and I much prefer it this way. It's also the shortest game in the series, which makes it suitable for replaying for a new high score or even speedrunning. And while its sequels would bring something new to the table, such as better controls, more Pikmin types, new mechanics, new ideas and concepts, nothing will ever quite hit the same way the first game does, at least to me. It is one of the best Nintendo games I've ever played, if not one of the best video games. If I haven't convinced you already, this game is definitely worth playing. If you like RTS games or you're completely new to the genre, then this game suits perfectly for veterans and newcomers alike. Alternatively, you could start with 2 or 3 or 4, but I find Pikmin 1 to be the most raw with a good blend of gameplay elements. Sure, the jankiness of the game is the one main detracting factor, but the faults of these fellas makes Pikmin Pikmin. Thank you for watching. It was really fun to make this video, as I've wanted to talk about this game in depth for a while, and I hope I delivered. I love this game, as you can tell by the video length. Anyway, I'm in the middle of deciding if I want to make short or long form content, or maybe a bit of both. Shorter videos means I get to pump out my concise thoughts about games quicker, but longer videos are probably better for giving my more elaborate and passionate thoughts. If you have any opinions on this, feel free to leave a comment. I'll catch you in the next video. Stay snazzy.